welcome to Spacefest 8 2017, Part 5. And here's where the program really matures. This is Discovery with pilot Eileen Collins. And we get a lot of great footage on this one. This was her first time up. Air Force Colonel, very experienced at a much funner airplane, the T-38. Air Force instructor of that program. And I keep saying, the shuttle looks really fun, but that T-38, that looks a lot more fun. So here she is, the pilot on her first space flight. And as you can tell, there's a lot of people on this crew, and they'll go up and do something wonderful with Russia as a result of Vance Brand's efforts. And here we see Mission Control Capcom. What I really enjoy about this launch, from the perspective of the crew as they chose to edit this, was you see a lot of mission control, and basically, once again, you realize all they see, basically, as far as the shuttle launches that we've been so lucky to watch so many times, is the TV screen on the side. They're looking at instruments and dials and listening to all the people that are reporting the status. And here we are up in space, and they're opening the airlock out of the mid-deck. Just a lot of stuff going on in this mission. So Eileen sure picked a really good one. Colonel Collins, that is, picked a really good one to go up the first time and witness such a great experience up in space. And like I said, this is Nicole Stott. At this time, you're going to see her later on, was actually working on the ground, turning this wonderful vehicle around between missions. And they have, once again, a new space hab, with a very interesting new configuration. And here they are up there looking back at the Spartan satellite, which I can't remember the whole history behind this thing, but I know they probably already grabbed it in space, fixed it, released it, brought it back again, fixed it, released it. It's just a lot of things going on in this mission. And there's the Spartan out in the distance after launch. They're on a 51.6 degree or something very close orbit, because this time they had to launch to the northwest in order to catch the Mir space station, which was already in space by the Soviets. And once again, this is all a great tribute to the great work of Vance Brand, who's actually here at Spacefest. So please go say hi to him and thank him for all of his days with Apollo and Russian/Soviet-U.S. relations and international cooperation in space. And here they are, actually up on the Mir in its orbit, very, very inclined, much different orbit than the normal one out of Kennedy. And she's out looking out the windows, looking up at Mir as they approach. She's just such a wonderful person to meet in person. She's just so humble and gracious and just wonderful. And we see, not the first time, but the first time from a different spacecraft, one of our shuttles in space. There's the crew looking up from the mid-deck, or correction, the payload section above the mid-deck. And they also filmed live footage of two cosmonauts up there talking back to the station. And one of the things we see here is Eileen Collins is actually on the shuttle looking back up at the Mir during a direct communications that they have. And the person you see on the right is a Russian cosmonaut, Soviet cosmonaut, I guess I should say at the time, who's doing translations for the messages from the Mir space station coming in directly to the space shuttle. And you can tell that they're both really enjoying this conversation. And if you listen to the original audio, it's really good. She just appreciates them so much, and promises that next time up they're going to actually connect and dock and exchange crews and show each other around. Some really good hospitality. Didn't happen on this flight, but this proved it could be done. And so, like I said, there's Eileen Collins on the left, talking directly to Mir, with the cosmonaut on the right providing translations. You can tell she's really having a good time up there. And there is the Mir. It has since deorbited, which means it burned into the atmosphere like the station will someday. And here they go out on a spacewalk on one of the two exits available on this the pipes, the access trunk. One goes to the space hab, the other one goes up into the open space. And so here they are with the Spartan again, working on it. And one thing I always want to remind you guys about space is you're weightless in this microgravity environment. But mass is still mass. And so if you have to move something or push something or pull something or turn something, it's going to have that mass still. So you still got to deal with that and then try to deal with bracing your body. So here's the guy on foot restraints pulling the whole mass of this heavy object, this Spartan satellite. And so it's not as easy as it looks. You really got to give them a lot of credit. They always have to have almost a comedy show, back in the 60s when the guys would pop out of the windows. But before landing, you always have some guy popping out of the middeck to talk to the crew in the main cabin up there. And here's the reentry burn. That's Eileen Collins has a. You think things like glow sticks and stuff are, invented by China or somebody. This was actually developed by NASA, and they put them on the suits at night and they lit them up and they activated them before landing. And here's a wonderful view of reentry. And later on, very soon, you're going to see this same view behind Eileen Collins as they approach runway 15 at the Kennedy Space Center. And it's almost dawn here. You can see here, you can hear her say, if you listen to the original audio, shoots and she pulls the parachute out and they put the nose down and land. It's just a wonderful view here, a rare view of an actual landing from inside the cockpit at the Kennedy Space Center. Looks a lot better from there than anything I've ever seen at Kennedy. Because, like I said before, all you can see with the mango trees is just the tail. I'm thinking that may be based on the sunrise runway 33, but I'm not really sure. I didn't see which way they came in from. Yeah, that would be 15 actually. And here they are outside after the sun came up, enjoying the great morning in Florida. She would fly 4 missions, 2 as a pilot, 2 as a commander. We didn't get video of this, but this is Hoot on his last flight, and he did keep flying much, and he's still flying today. And here's Jerry Ross. We missed this one too, I think. STS-74 with Atlantis. And here's Eileen Collins' second time up. We also missed this video, STS-84 on Discovery. We did catch this one. This was Endeavour, STS-93, also known as 88. This was the first time we saw the space station actually go up with 2 vehicles. Don't even get me started on the Russian module, but it launched with a lot of American taxpayer help and a Boeing help as well. And it launched into space, and then followed by that was supposed to be the Unity module from the U.S. side, but something went wrong, and as is often the case, they lit up the engines for 10 seconds before launch, and at that time the stack only held down by hold down bolts at the bottom of the boosters started rolling around. But it did not go up. They had to go fix this, and later on they did. And that wasn't a problem with the engine problem. The problem was you only have a certain amount of time to hit what they call the mid-plane where you can launch in a certain launch window to hit the station, much more difficult than normal flights. And so they ran out of time to launch and meet the station up in, well, there wasn't a station really, there was a Russian module. They're bringing up the U.S. module. But finally, as you can see, they, about the 2-minute mark, they pulled the oxygen vent, at which time they closed and locked the visors. And 2 minutes later, the engines burned, and they were in the mid-plane this time, and they went. This mission was commanded by Air Force Colonel named Cabana, who went on later to run the Kennedy Space Center. Me and him still have a lot of issues about my treatment at the Kennedy, but we'll get into that on another day. But 2009, I got some of my best pictures ever, but it's not really Kennedy that I had a problem with. It was Delaware North, the contractor. Like I said, things have really changed in the time since you could just drive your own car. You had to actually ask for a pass, but you got through security with your pass, they mailed you, and you could drive right onto the base. But they've changed all that since 9/11. It's kind of crazy because there's so many things can go wrong with this vehicle. I really wouldn't worry so much about what a tourist is going to do from the Banana Causeway, but they don't even let cars on anymore. You got to park and then get in a long line that's a ripe terrorism target because of the long lines. I mean, just like up in Manchester, the terrorists are going to hit the lines outside, not the. I guess they can't get inside, so they're going to just blow up people as they come out or go in large crowds. And I've always had the same issue with stadiums and NASA facilities and everywhere else where you pull a bunch of people together in TSA lines, including airports, by the way. But here we are up in space, and they do launch in that 51.6 degree orbit, which the space station is still in to this day. And they're connecting to they're connecting the U.S. side to the Russian side, so the space station is officially born at this time as an international space station. And here we are here in the mid deck, looking up at the new space station before they meet. Actually, what they did was they had a docking adapter that's still there between the two modules, and right now there's a lot of pipes running in and out, and they did get both of these sides pressurized, and the air system and life support is still provided by the original Russian module, but they have a lot of supplies and air ducts and everything Russian. From what I hear, that area of the section is very loud because of all the noise generated by the life support systems. But I'll tell you what, they really grew this thing over the years. Everything happened. I think only one flight didn't go to the space station after this, and that would be the one that was lost, STS-107. Columbia went up with another Space Hab module in the 28.5 degree orbit and ended up coming in on a descending node over North America. And as we all know, Columbia was lost over Texas. And I really don't have any thoughts, positive or negative, about if that mission was even required or why it went up. But I do have a lot of opinions about how great the people were. Dr. Laurel Clark was the flight surgeon at the Naval Air Station in Pensacola that I met shortly after this was lost, and she was a really good friend of the flight surgeons, Navy flight surgeons there in Pensacola. And what a sad day it was. It was a day I remember very well. On a Saturday, got up, somehow turned on Dan Rather, and saw very few minutes after it happened that it was lost. And that night, the Eglin radar picked up aluminum dust flying over Pensacola, and so half of it came down, half of it was just lost in the fireball that happened when that thing broke apart at Mach 25. Here we are releasing another antenna, very dangerously. They can poke through the suit, but they did it successfully. they had to fix a lot of things when they got up there. And one of the things they did plan to do was connect a lot of wires between the two modules, Russian/Soviet and U.S., so that they would interoperate as one unit. And so that's been pretty much the case ever since then. But boy, they sure added on to that like a bunch of Tinker Toys, just keep adding and adding and adding. So here we are going through the tubes that now turn up once you get out of the mid-deck and you connect to the Russian space station. It was kind of creepy looking, but the Russian and Colonel Cabana decided to go up together and share the experience of being the first to enter the space station, both the Unity and the Russian side. So that's what you're seeing here, even though, like I said, it looks creepy, but you know, that was international diplomacy at its best. And so we get our first look at a International Space Station, and it's still there. Everybody who's flown since then recognizes this area, even though it has stickers. One thing I've loved about the Russian side is they have the guts to do what NASA hasn't had the guts to do since Apollo 8, and that's praise God in space. They have all sorts of Russian Orthodox icons and stuff like that on the station that the NASA editors always try to shade out, but I've seen them many times in videos that, well, let's just say this are never replayed. So they got a lot of room up there. I think more air volume than even Skylab, even at this point. Not quite the diameter of Skylab, but there's just a lot of things going on up there, and they'll just keep adding and adding and adding over the years, and put in water generating stations based on recycled water, and they'll do a lot of cool things over the years. And I've always had mixed feelings about the station, and if it should still be up there, because keeping it operating at this time does detract from the budget requirements to go to Mars. But at the same time, we've learned so much about going to Mars on this station. It's actually under the Van Allen belt, so you're not going to see the radiation problems you had between here and Mars out in interplanetary space. But you still have all the same experiences of a long space duration flight to Mars, including crews spending a long time up there. They're going to have to build some kind of station to go to Mars, though, because they're not going to do that for that long in the Orion capsule or any other one. One thing they had to do when they got up there, in addition to connecting cables, was remove a lot of the stuff that was there to secure the station segments on launch, because you got to remember all these had very rough launches up to the station. So they got up there and pulled about, I guess, 300-400 pounds worth of just connectors that were put up there to hold down the station for launch. No longer required because it's now in free fall microgravity in a much smoother environment. So they brought a lot of these braces and hold down clamps and stuff, screws, that kind of thing, back to the shuttle for return to Earth. But it's a much different, bigger station now, but these original two segments are still there. And at this point, we did have an International Space Station. Once these guys left, not long after that, crews went up, and they've been up there ever since. And we're going through the tubes now as we return to the shuttle. And they always say that things are much bigger in space. You know, things that don't look so big. I watched a couple of these things in construction just east of the astronaut quarters at the Kennedy Space Center, where they put all these things together. And they don't really look that big when you're down here. You know, maybe like the back of an RV or something each, with a lot of that volume occupied by equipment and things like that. But believe me, they say once you're up there, it gets a lot bigger. And you're going to see they've invented us. There we go back to the shuttle. They've invented a lot of traditions, mostly based on the Navy over the years, including the bells for entering or change of command, that kind of thing. There's those pipes I was talking about that connect the Russian side out to the rest of the station, and they're very loud from what I hear. But I don't think those rails are there anymore in the Unity module, but they may be. I don't really know, but I know that place is now packed with stickers, equipment, experiments, and that kind of thing. And somewhere near here, they actually put the modules for the crew quarters where they sleep. And they're finally going to close up shop, get back on to the shuttle. Not at this point, but very soon. Lock it down. And they're back in the mid-deck now. And here's the other exit out of that tube. They're going to do some spacewalks again. Make sure everything's good. Let's just say after launching this huge Unity module, it's going to be a pretty safe and soft landing. But in time, they would take off these original solar arrays you see in the background, put on a lot of more powerful, bigger ones. As they continue to build the station, they'll put on trusses and solar arrays and all sorts of cooling systems. And the program really was dedicated, especially after Columbia was lost, to just getting that station up in space. And at that point, even by that point, a lot of these things could be, there's a sunset for you. A lot of these things could be done by things that now exist today, such as the SpaceX capsule or the ATK orbital Cygnus, that kind of thing. So after a while, you had to wonder if it was worth it to put all that mass of the shuttle up there just to meet the station, especially when they were just bringing supplies up. But it was what it was. But they kept the shuttle flying because they wanted to get this thing finished. And there's Jerry. And I'll give him $100 if he does that on the ground. Launched a couple precursors to today's famous CubeSats. Another beautiful sunset by Jerry. What a great photographer he is. That time you see some cloud banks. They had separated and they were preparing for re-entry about 2 days later. The Russians have figured out a way, maybe with our help as always, to get up there in about 6 hours since then. But until then, it was 2 days up, 2 days down once you separated. There's another great view of some sparks out the window going through the plasma storm that would take Columbia not long after this. On a very similar descent, actually. Well, not really. This is up from the 51.6 degree orbit. Columbia was lost on the 28.5 over North America. But same principle. And they're coming in using the new and improved heads-up display, which will get better and better all the time. And there's the horizon by those two bars that you see in the middle, coming up on the runway. And the flare maneuver is complete. And main gear touchdown in a second. And after that, I don't know if they used parachutes on this or not. It was a very light landing because of everything left in space. And nose wheel touchdown. And rolling out on Kennedy 1-5. We'll stop, Houston. Just a beautiful landing, beautiful mission from beginning to end. We see Jim Lovell on your right in the middle there, and Gene Cernan. I met them both last year again at Spacefest, and we've lost Gene since then. We've talked about him quite a lot over the years. Jim Lovell was not going to be here this year, unfortunately. We'll miss them both. So here's STS-95, also known as 93, with Columbia. This will be the last successful landing of Columbia. This is the last mission before she's lost on the Spacehab mission. And we have a cutout. Probably a warning sign of things to come. The program just became, I don't know, too routine or too government, political, or whatever. So the access arms rolling back to meet the crew cabin. They're trying to save the vehicle in case it has a wild idea with all those free gases and pressurized explosive fuels to do something wrong. Next time up, they try again, and it will work. Here's the last successful launch and landing of Columbia. And this is Eileen Collins is actually the mission commander on this mission. And of all these people we've seen so far, she's the only one that will actually fly after we lose Columbia. So she'll fly one more mission as commander. So here we go with the next try. 3 up and running, 104% throttle, chamber pressure, and off she goes. A wonderful night launch in Kennedy on Columbia. The same problem that caused the loss of Columbia on the next flight was in a type of tank design that was also in this one, but took until Columbia till they discovered the problem they were having with that. And there's separation, and there's the tank, and there's the pipe in the payload bay. And there's Commander Eileen Collins saying hi from space. And you can tell that Columbia just returned right before this for a major upgrade in Palmdale. So it has the latest and greatest equipment that will also be on its last flight. A lot of interesting things going on in this mission as well. You can really tell the difference between the Hubble mission at 350 degrees and these lower orbits. I'm pretty sure this was the heaviest payload ever for a shuttle, which is why the orbit's so low. It always made a lot of sense to me using the B-52 for the lifting bodies of the X-15, or the approach used by Virgin Space for their suborbital craft, anything like that, to get up high before you launch. And one of the theories was you get the shuttle up there, then you start launching satellites. You can really save on fuel required to get these things up to a higher orbit, which is what happened here. But I'll tell you what, from the first launches, you can really see the difference in the cockpit. Same avionics and that kind of thing. There's an ohms berm. They didn't miss the chance to use the new advances in computers and that kind of thing that they added on. Even as advanced as 78 technology was, it was nothing like what they were able to bring up uh, in storage containers on the middeck and used, including email to your husband back home. Here's coming back in. Here's a plasma trail. We always see Jerry Ross filming as filmed from the ground. And another great heads-up display. You can see exactly what's going on here as they cross over the coast of Florida. I'm going to say this is going to be runway 15. Correction, 33. Because they're making a turn to the right. And you can see Orlando and all that in the background. That's a lot closer to what you really actually see when you're looking at this thing coming in, because it's just diving in like that. And I appreciate that rear view of just an appreciation of how steep they're falling when they come in. Heads-up display will later be even improved after this, but it's really great to watch this. Coming up on runway 33 at Kennedy, and the lights beforehand, letting the pilots visually see the runway, including all the help from the heads-up display. Here she comes in, Florida, for the last time. So this is the last successful landing for the Space Shuttle Columbia. And we certainly do miss her and those who we've lost from our cruise. But in better news, a lot of these great pilots and mission specialists and commanders will be here at Spacefest, so go say hi to them and thank them for their time bringing Columbia home safely, many times which they did, many times heroically. What a great lady she is. We're up on Jerry Ross's final of 7 flights, and this is actually the last flight before Columbia was lost. It's another beautiful day in Florida, and every time he goes, you can see a lot of great cinematography going on. This is kind of a freaky experience of getting on board. These things, these parachutes actually can really weigh a lot after a couple of hours, and they get very painful on the back because the seats are really not designed for these parachutes. So you have backstabbing on the ground before you even take off, and after that you get the 3Gs. So I'm not sure it's a comfortable experience at all going up into orbit. But as you can see, this is the view of a liftoff from inside the crew cabin. And when those engines go and the SRBs ignite, you know you're on your way. It's a very shaky ride. Story Musgrave tells some great stories about what that first 2 minutes is like. But I always asked Charlie and other astronauts, Charlie Walker, why these astronauts like to fly upside down when they're going up, and they said because they like to see the horizon. And by this time they had enough TDRS satellites up in orbit where they didn't really need to keep the nose down anymore. So but they did need to access the TDRS, and so they rolled it up about 2 minutes from now, or 4 minutes from now, they rolled it right side up, so that because they were going over the horizon of where they could reach the ground stations on a direct line of sight, so they did have good access to the satellites up in geosynchronous orbit for relay purposes. So they flipped it around and rolled it right side up. And so you can see all the advances in the cockpit, the new glass cockpits we had back then. And you can also see what's going on with the ohms burn. It's about 1/32 of 1G, but when you're up there, you can sure feel it. Jerry's just such a great photographer. I just appreciate his work so much up there. Taking the time to share this with all of us. And there's the new glass cockpit. Jerry, like I said, has I think he set the record for space flights. He's on the left there, and hope you get a chance to meet him while you're here. And here we are up at the 51.6 degree orbit again, connecting with the space station. And wow, what a different station it is at this point. And at this point, there actually is a crew up on the space station. And so, as once again is tradition, they'll open the hatch. Uh, Commanders will do a hug, and as they enter the station, as you can see, much different than the last time we saw it. Uh, Much more packed and complex. You start to see stickers and icons and all sorts of great stuff. But here they are on that 51.6 degree orbit for the last time in a long time, between the time this mission flew and the next one up after we lost Columbia, which wasn't even heading here. It was going on the different orbit. And I can tell you many times why I really don't like space movies. And Gravity was the worst of all. And I'll tell you why when we get there. One thing that they were able to do at this new and improved station after building so many components is do spacewalks into the payload bay and other places from a robotic arm attached to the station, which gave them a lot more range to go look around and see things and do things. And so here we are once again on a very complex space mission that all began not from the shuttle but from the station itself. And so these trusses were all very impressive and growing and just a much different station. But somehow they got to a point at some point where they were able to not just spend all their time maintaining the station, but actually doing some actual science. Rare, but it happens. But it was a very, very equipment-intensive infrastructure, which the more equipment you put on, the more maintenance you have to do. And there's Jerry right there. Once the there's a CO2 canister, which I guess they had to change out every couple of days to stay ahead of Apollo 13. And so there's always a lot of maintenance that you have to do on the station. Once again, I'll give Jerry $100 if he does this on the ground. So you couldn't put more people up there, half of them for maintenance, half of them for operations like you do on aircraft carriers, because you just got to spend so much time keeping up with the maintenance requirements of this thing. It's just, the bigger they grew it, the more they had to do to keep it going. It's wonderful what water does up there, huh? I heard a rumor, I'm not sure if it's true or not, that the astronauts from the shuttle, when they're up there, actually like to sleep in that access tube for some reason. But they do. But at some point it's time to go home, so they start closing the hatches and make their way back to Earth. And here we are, back on the shuttle. This is the mid-deck, not the mid-deck, but it's the area behind the crew consoles, where you have the overhead windows. And once again, we have separation. Roger. And so a good view once again looking aft as they separate from the space station. And about 2 days later they'll be coming back to Earth. And there's a wonderful sunrise or sunset, one of the two. Probably sunset. 2 days later the payload bay doors are closing. Jerry's coming down for the last time. And they're making preparations to stow everything so things don't get knocked around on landing. And once again, it's very sad to see the gap in the program go on for so long. This will be the last successful shuttle mission for many years until the Columbia Accident Investigation Board determines how we lost the one before on re-entry. So this one and the other 3 survivors will stay grounded for a while, but they will get back in operation, with all future flights going only to the space station to get that thing up there. And the last two were even dubious if they were even required, but they went anyway. As the people that had worked at NASA try to come up with a new life goals vision statement after the end of this program, and many of them went on to ULA, ATK, SpaceX, other activities. And here we are making our right-hand turn onto the runway. This will be a landing on runway 15. So it's going to be south to north once again, coming in over the Banana Causeway, the Banana River, Indian River, and making the final, for a very long time, space flight for America. And that will be the last landing of many for Jerry Ross, and what a great guy he is. And please go up and say hi to him at Spacefest, because you'll never meet a smarter guy with more experience saving the program when things didn't go right and satellites weren't deploying antennas and things correctly, or solar arrays, and he went up there and fixed the ball. Yeah, I was so happy to see Discover magazine use this picture I took from the south on the Banana Causeway. A lot of great video from that one too. Interesting. Everybody was talking about the new stuff going up from the south with the unmanned stuff. And here we are at launch as seen from Kennedy. That's to the west of where the launch pad. I was to the south at the time. And it rolls, just like you see in my picture, out to the 28.5 degree, and there's me in the background. Actually not, because the tank's covering up the Banana Causeway. But that's Kennedy Space Center, no doubt about that. A lot of great views from separation. It's kind of funny when you're sitting there watching the boosters take off. When it goes supersonic, you hear like a Star Trek swoosh. It just goes from a loud rumble that can actually shake your bones to just nothingness in less than a second. But that's because the sound will never reach you, because the shuttle's moving away even faster than the sound, and so it'll never get there. So the sound disappears very quickly on all the launches. You can see, especially from down there so close to the pad. Once again, this was 51.6 degree. Another ohms burn. There they go. It's a 51.6 degree rendezvous at the station, so I do stand corrected. This one did take off toward the station, and here they are doing something that was invented after Columbia was lost, and that's the backflip observation to check for damage. And on this one, they did see damage on the underside, under the nose, by the nose gear hatch, and so they decided, was it worth it to pull out the gap filler that had come loose on launch, or did they just want to risk it burning off in the atmosphere, or what to do after that? So it was an interesting question that the first test validated as far as the reason for doing that rollover. But they were also concerned if they pulled the gap filler out between tiles, what would happen in that gap during reentry, because you're going to go directly with 3,000 degrees of heat onto an aluminum surface. Pretty much the same thing that was in the area that breached the cabin on the loss of Columbia. So they were asking a lot of questions up there, despite all the smiles, about what that meant, and if they would make it worse or better by pulling out that gap filler that had come loose. Just seemed at the time you could either take scissors to it, what was left in there, or you could what they were afraid of is a zip, because once you get enough once you get the thing going to pull off one tile, chances were always good a lot more would follow, and that would not be good. But here they are going off the station through all the wonderful equipment and supplies they had brought up and things like that. So almost every time they brought up a lot of supplies in the mid-deck for the station, as the Cygnus and SpaceX Dragon do now. Also, they brought up parts of the station itself, which is, that's certainly one of the validations for keeping the shuttle flying. Is as good as the SpaceX guys and ATK guys are in bringing up supplies. You really couldn't bring up modules themselves with those rockets. I'm pretty sure ULA has some stuff that could do that if they wanted to, and probably cheaper. But there were also things going wrong at the time before they developed the technology to do it remotely to fix that you required people to do. In that case, they certainly did it on the station. Every time I've seen the Russians on the station, they seem to be drinking vodka, playing cards in the Russian module. They don't really seem to integrate with the crew very much. But they're up there, and it is an International Space Station. I'm not really sure what's going on here, but they do have a module I saw being constructed back in 2000, the early 2000s. That's a module called Leonardo that kind of works like I guess the Dragon capsule would, where you can bring it up and bring it down and load it up, and they all look like tin cans going up there, and that's basically what this thing is. It's just a tin can filled with supplies, but it works. And so they bring up the module full of supplies on top of whatever you can bring into the mid deck. In this particular mission, I'm pretty sure this wasn't the Leonardo. This, I'm almost certain, was the attachment of a living module called the Harmony module. And I saw, right before my dad had died, we also saw Kibo go up, and I got a lot of good footage down there in the building where they built Kibo. So that was interesting to see that go up as well. Very similar as far as the outside, the overall module design, but inside they all had different functions and equipment and facilities. One of the things they decided to do after Columbia was do an in-space test of tile repair, just in case they would have to do that. And so that's what happened here. Just a test to see if they could basically be brick and mortar guys to repair a cracked shuttle tile, maybe even a missing one. They really took all this seriously because they had already lost 40% of the fleet. they really didn't want to lose any more, because you can imagine Southwest Airlines would have lost 40% of their planes in disasters. That the sense of keeping going might not be so well received among the public, but these guys really took this stuff seriously. They really did want to get the station finished, and they really did want to keep the shuttle flying, but only long enough to do that, minus 2 flights, of course, which we'll maybe or maybe not talk about later. 134 was a completely worthless mission, and 135 was a good mission, but SpaceX could have done it for a lot cheaper. And for 135, my idea was always to send that shuttle up unmanned on an intentional. There's the gap filler between the tiles being removed. I wanted to send 135 up one more time. It was scheduled to have its last mission before 134, but they found enough politicians in Congress that would fund 135. And I to this day, I'll place bets nobody can even remember what that thing did except for serve as the last shuttle mission. This is another Navy tradition that was inherited by the station. It's called the working party. Like I said, you gotta remember these things are all weightless, but they still have mass. So if they're heavy, you still gotta really use some arm to get them moving. These guys were all good shots and good receivers, and they scored a touchdown every time. This is what they do with a lot more gravity curve on aircraft carriers whenever they have a resupply mission. And one of the things they did on the shuttle, as mercy and compassion for the crew up there, was they brought trash down. And this was another great mission to the station. if they would have had an RTLS intentional, they'd have to modify the cockpit in order to have somebody by remote control take care of a wonderful thing called lowering the landing gear. So that was the only thing that really stopped NASA from doing the unmanned RTLS. It was always something I always wondered if they could really do or not, and that would have been a great opportunity to just get NASA back to the A in NASA, the aeronautics side, and see if they could actually land a shuttle using RTLS, which returned to the launch site. Because I've been to so many scrubs because they thought they would need the RTLS. They never did. But I've always wondered, and I think a lot of aerospace engineers did as well, if it could really be done. That would have been a really good chance to end the program with something back to NASA basics. But I don't even know what 135 did. But I did see it fly over Florida coming in on landing with the space station right behind it. It was on an ascending node right over to the south of Clearwater, and you could really see it coming in well right before sunrise. And so they are leaving the station almost complete. And once again, very important to do all this stuff ahead of time to get everybody ready for this mission. And this will be the last flight, like I said, for Eileen Collins. And she really had some great flights and became a very notorious figure in space history. And so please do catch her at Spacefest and say hi. And at some point, after having all the fun up in space, they will have to pack things up and come back. It's about, like I said, 2 days. The water's just so funny to watch in space. It's about 2 days after separation until they can get into a position for the re-entry interface opportunity, because you have to line up just right with 2 chances a day, sometimes 3 to land at Kennedy or Edwards. And so at last they will close the cargo bay, and Eileen Collins will have her last great mission. And the eye candy just keeps getting better and better in these glass cockpits with the new video technology. And one of the results of Columbia, for better or worse, was they added a lot more cameras inside the cockpit, so you have a lot more available raw footage. You can see if NASA wants to release or not. But here's even a better view of that trailing plasma. And they're coming in into Kennedy, and they're making a landing here on runway 15 to the south. And Eileen will step out for the last time after the suit change. And thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in part 6. God bless.